I want to start with an interesting question for me personally, because PoE2 is so different than PoE1. And I don't know how familiar you are with World of Warcraft, but a big event there for me was the Gates of Anchorage opening with like basically the server coming together and working on something and that affecting like a little bit of the future outcome. So have you ever thought of doing a league like that where the future of the league or how it goes core depends on how us as players
To
perform?
byłoby genialne, takie community
Maybe we lose
zbiera się
the
i
war towards
pracuje na
Leech, or we
wspólny
win the
cel.
war, and that like changes the future league.
It's something interesting. I feel like we did something like this before, but I'm trying to remember which thing it was. Wasn't it like Tempest, actually? Like, I feel like Tempest had a mechanic like this, but maybe it was like really not obvious. Like, it's actually the kind of thing I am interested in doing. We just haven't really kind of ended up with a league design that kind of wanted to do it. Because you have to be really careful with that stuff, that you don't, like, it can be frustrating for players just because, okay, probably not the thing you're referring to, because that's the whole like coming together and actually like towards a single goal over the long term. But we've had a few mechanics where playing the league affected before, and I think Tempest was one of them. Where like I think it was that one where the more people who farmed something, after a certain number of people had farmed it, it actually the mechanic moved us to another location.
Oh, that's cool too.
And yeah, so that was kind of interesting. But like I think that we sort of decided for that particular case that we weren't like that happy with it, because I kind of had this thing of like, you know, the idea of unfairness of like, you know, oh, you have to like, someone says like, oh, this happened in the middle of the night, you need to wake up and do this, and so we kind of weren't happy with that. But I mean, the thing you were saying there about the gates, I mean, like that's pretty cool. I just like, I guess you have to be prepared for like both outcomes and then exactly what you're going to do in both cases. Like it needs to actually feel like it had a meaningful impact.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be the follow-up league. Like it could be something that you do.
Okej, czyli nie planują na razie takiej mechaniki.
Kill like 6 billion monsters, and if we don't, like the league will be different.
Right.
But yeah,
I guess I'm also kind of into the idea, although maybe people aren't, of like you create like a thing that
Contribute.
once you've achieved it, unlock something for all players.
Tak,
Like that kind of stuff could be
taki.
potentially fun. So I mean, there's stuff you could do there, but
Yeah.
I don't have any plans for it in particular.
Okej, czyli nie mają planów, tak, nie mają planu. A to byłoby fajne, bo to jest taki contribute, że zbieracie jakieś materiały, macie określony czas na to i możecie odblokować jakiegoś bossa albo arię. I w WoWie było mnóstwo takich eventów i one są takie konsolidujące bardzo dla społeczności.
equivalent. Like let's say Blight, right? Are we just not getting a tab at all, or are we going to instead get like a regular premium tab or something like that?
Yeah, so currently you don't get anything, and basically that's because we still want to be able to potentially add that content later, and then at that point that tab will be, you know, for that league. So if we gave you something now, then we'd have to like, I guess, read only the other. If we gave you a bonus tab now, we'd have to like give you a read only one or something like that. And effectively, the main thing is that we're trying to just make it so that where it makes sense, the thing you
Będzie później.
So, yeah, I think that for the particular one you mentioned there.
Yeah.
I suspect that in the future there'll be a time when that will work again, and so you're kind of going to be good in that regard.
Okay.
But I guess it might be like, it is worth bringing up though that if we get to the point of like literally we're never going to use this ever in PoE2, I suppose we could consider like having a replacement tab for something like that. But at least for the time being, like we still intend that a lot of that stuff still gets used anyway.
That makes sense. Yeah. Now, the next question is also about stash tabs. And I remember at some point there was a big discussion about consolidating normal tabs and letting people make quad tabs. Now, if I recall correctly, the reason this didn't go through is there was a big issue with like database problems because we already have stuff in remove only tabs, right? PoE2 doesn't have this issue. Is there a chance that we can, like, for example, there's quite a lot of people like me that have 100 normal stash tabs and would like to merge 4 at a time into a quad stash tab. Is that something that could be an option now with PoE2?
Byłoby mega spoko.
Let me think about that. So it's certainly not something that we've done. I suppose we could
Czyli
potentially
nie.
do that. I have to say that I'm personally not a huge fan of the quad tab overall, just because, like, I understand the like gameplay utility of it, but it's just.
Czyli nigdy nie
something
będzie.
about it that sucks a little bit to me, of just about the way that it just. You don't really. I feel like you don't appreciate the items the same way. Now, admittedly, if you're just playing the game and you're like, you know, like you don't care about this at all, right? Like I understand that you don't, and so it's fine. We've got that option. But yeah, it's just one of those things that I've kind of never really loved about it.
No, myślę, że rozwiązaniem jest posiadanie, tak, 20 tabów. Sniki, myślę, że tak. Siema, ziołek, siema. Ziolek. Rafałek, tak? Że elf trochę? No może. On jest mega pocieszny jest, Jonathan.
Might be able to do that, but yeah, as I said, it's just not something.
Dokładnie, Szajba. Dokładnie. To widać gołym okiem od razu.
Yeah, it's funny you brought up Tempest. That's actually where I ended up buying.
A, witam czołgiste, siemano.
Because the Radiating
Right,
Tempest and the
right.
20 Exiles, I was like,
Right.
And I was new at the time, and you know, when you're new to the game,
Right.
you don't want to get rid of everything. So,
Mm-hmm.
the next question is: we've seen on the PoE health bar that there are numbers now, right? So we have basically damage numbers in the game. So I wanted to bring up: have you thought about letting us have a literal target dummy?
Okay,
IDP
so
z
we've thought about this
materii.
for sure. The concern that came up the moment we discussed the target dummy is okay. What resistances does it have? What like all this kind of stuff. Like basically there'd have to be state for like how much armor does it have? How much evasion does it have? Like all these things. So then we started getting into okay. Like you'd have to have some way to set these values, right? You'd have to be able to be like, okay, I'm going to set up a target dummy with this particular amount of armor or whatever to simulate whatever boss it was. And then we're kind of like, okay, should we then have a thing where you can like select like, okay, here's a boss that it's going to be equivalent to, and then like that would be how we could to do stuff like this. And then we're kind of like, well, hang on, at some point you just got the actual boss itself, you might as well just use that. And then we're kind of like, well,
Siema Wardeno.
like maybe the target dummy kind of then is like not kind of like it starts to lose its utility then, you know. So the whole chain of reasoning kind of came from all of that stuff. Like I do understand like where you're coming from though if you're saying that's not good enough. But
I think you're
like,
overcomplicating it a little.
yeah. Right. So you reckon target dummy with no stats, and then you're good?
Literally a target dummy with no stats. Like, and like, if you really like, if you don't want to overcomplicate it, you could even have two, right? One that's the equivalent of like, let's say Shaper, right? Or literally just like one boss and one normal monster. But even if all you give us is a target dummy with no resistances and no nothing, that is like already a lot better in my opinion.
Dokładnie, target dummy
I mean, I'm definitely like
jest
I'm actually
bardzo
kind of,
istotne
like,
do
fine
min
with this,
maxingu.
but,
Widać to na przykład w World of Warcraft z DPS meterami, to
like, anytime you're discussing
pomaga
it,
graczom
there's
się
always all the
doskonalić.
questions of like, okay, so then what are people going to immediately ask for the moment we add this? And so that's how we end up down the path of like, oh, it's like going to require this or this or this or this, and then all these things. And then that's suddenly the feature.
Nie będzie target dummy,
Like
no.
the feeling of complexity. So
Yeah.
I guess that's just sort of explain like how that sort of stuff occurs. But yeah, I mean, look, if you're saying it's fine with no like with no stats at all, like maybe it's something we could consider doing. Like I'm not really opposed to it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Okej,
I
ale
know
to
a lot
nie,
of
nie
people
jest
want it.
tak, że mają coś przeciwko, tylko nie pomyśleli o tym, ale nie mają nic przeciwko prowadzeniu tego.
So to hear the case for people who don't want it, like what do you think is really the behind that? Because I mean I've heard this argument from some GG people before, but as far as people in the community, like what do you reckon is the reason for like no target dummies?
Let's see. I'm seeing so many people say I do want it. Someone said we have POB, don't need dummy.
Aha.
It would feel too competitive.
Right.
Misleading numbers. I'm trying to like pick
Well, they
out
shouldn't
like
be misleading. So long as the target dummy actually emulates a real monster, the numbers wouldn't be misleading, right?
yeah.
So then that's the argument, therefore, and then that exact thing there is like, oh, well, that's why you have to have, the ability to simulate a given actual enemy.
Sometimes less info is better. I don't know. It's hard to see like reasons for why not.
Sometimes less info is better.
The next topic is gonna be a bit of a longer one and a bit of a discussion.
Okej.
I want to talk about what the current state of portaling out at bosses is, and then talking a little bit about pausing and logging out as well.
Yeah. So basically, so you can't portal out of a boss fight.
Nie, on czytał opinie innych ludzi, wiesz, to on chce, Zaran chce mieć domis.
With timers and stuff like that, but eventually we're just kind of like, you know what? Why are we
On czytał właśnie casualowych czytowników.
completely ban it, and then that way we don't have to worry about like all the potential kind of like rules and weird stuff about like, oh, you stand at this location, the boss can't hit you, like random stuff like that. Like it just effectively removed a lot of potential exploits. And I think that probably was just a straight up improvement. There's been actually a few other changes we've made. Like this is something probably people will never notice, but you can no longer swap your gear in the middle of a boss fight either. That's been now disallowed too. And like a few other things like this. Like these are just things that like once again people probably won't normally run into if they're not trying to do some kind of exploit, but effectively like we just want to make sure that like when you're actually in for a boss fight you actually have like a proper experience. Like you have to actually overcome the boss without some kind of weirder forms of cheese that you might otherwise try to do.
So what happens if let's say that a hardcore player goes in, they get 60% through the fight and they realize they can't do this? What happens if they log out and wait until the next day?
So you can always log out, like resurrect at checkpoint effectively, or like log out and just wait for time. So like it's possible to get out of a boss fight, right? Like you're not locked into that forever. So that being the case, like effectively, like like if you know that you can't do it, you can get out. And this is sort of an interesting question because I know there are people who are kind of be like, oh, it would be nice if like once you've decided to do something, you're kind of committed to that action. But I just think that we probably didn't want to really go down that path because it would mean that like I feel like that would kind of probably feel a bit bad, I think.
Okay,
and like so the concern then
so just from understanding, so from the first thing you said, I was under the impression that if I go into a boss fight, let's say I'm going to fight the Shaper, right? Either the Shaper dies or I die, but then that's not the case.
No, that's not the case. So you can actually like you can bail. That is the case. You can't portal, but you can choose to restart at checkpoint or like log out to back. Like if you log out. Okay, so if you just Alt F4, right? What'll happen is when you log back in, you'll be in exactly the same place you were, which is like, but that's more that the feature there is more about like trying to make sure that you don't like lose your place when you're just playing, right? And you disconnect for a reason.
Yeah.
But if you want to choose to leave the fight, you can decide to do that. Like that is okay. And just another thing with that, by the way, is like I believe that the feature where if you lag, that the game gets paused, I believe that did get done, which means that even if you just have like internet lag, the actual server will pause while the lag is happening. So then, regardless of whether you get disconnected or not, you're not going to die during the middle of an internet lag spike. And I believe that it might be like 100 milliseconds or something like that. Is like basically if your client's not responding for that amount of time, then effectively the whole instance just pauses and like we'll just wait until you're good before we keep going again. So that's how that works basically. But yes, you can leave.
Yeah. So could you walk me through the difference real quick? So will I have to log out and wait 15 minutes, or will it be hitting escape and then clicking like leave fight?
Yeah, so if you hit escape, there's a button there called respawn at checkpoint, and effectively that will just mean that you can, at any time you can choose to do that. Now, obviously the concern with that, like, and we've actually discussed this quite a lot internally about like, should that be okay? Because there was like a whole discussion with this of like, the fact that there's just a button you can do to press this kind of like would mean that like, it's like even if you see like a slam coming, you'd be able to like push escape and just like push that button before it arrives. And that is the case. But the thing is, if we required you to log out and wait 15 minutes, that would kind of be lame too. Like, I don't really want to like, and the counter argument to that one was like, oh, but like that's at least more friction to actually doing this. And it's like, well, yeah, but then do you really want the strategy to be that you have to log out and wait 15 minutes? Like, it's just kind of lame. So in the end, we kind of decided to do the more, I guess what I would call player friendly thing of just like, that option is there for you. You can leave if you want. So effectively, yeah, in some sense, I suppose you could say that that's kind of equivalent to the Alt F4 you could do in PoE1. Yeah. But it's that's kind of where we ended up anyway.
So just to confirm, this is not kill you on hardcore, right? Oh, I lost audio.
Wait, no, it doesn't. Oh, sorry, yeah, it doesn't.
Okay.
But let me just think about this because I feel like I'm just getting a memory suddenly of us talking about that as well. I'm pretty sure that that's I'm pretty sure that that's fine. But I feel like I remember.
The concern I would have there of why that would be a bad thing, and I know a lot of people are against logout macro.
Right.
And I actually thought it would be something like a 2-second portal you'd have to cast, and then it would fully reset the fight, and you have to go again.
Right.
The reason, personally, I'm not a big fan of like having to commit is that you end up over farming so hard to the point where you go in and there's a 0% chance of you dying, right?
Right.
Like as a normal Shaper for now. Whereas, like, if you can die, it's a lot more fun being able to go in before you're ready. So that's awesome. I'm very, very happy with that answer.
Wow, jestem zajarany fest.
By the way, that there is
Nawet HCK może będziemy grać z takim systemem.
League flag. I don't know if it's exposed on the private League interface. It probably isn't, honestly. But there's a very old League flag that actually does enable a timer when you disconnect before you actually get disconnected. So if we wanted to run a League that had that functionality of where like you have to commit to everything when you do it, like because you'll stay in game, we actually could turn on a flag that would allow that. So I don't know if you ever want to run a gauntlet like that sometime, where you actually have to you have to commit to something like that, because it is possible to turn on. Yeah. So that's something we could do.
That'd be perfect. I think that's really good for a gauntlet.
Right.
A quick question as well. In PoE1, we have the 6-second disconnect timer Is that
Yep.
accounted for with the 100 millisecond lag thing you talked about?
Okay, so effectively the 6-second disconnect timer is still like that is just like after 6 seconds of like you not being in game, then we just terminate the socket and you're gone. But because of the 100 millisecond pause thing existing now, effectively the 6-second thing doesn't like really matter anymore because it's only important for, like because the instance is frozen anyway. So all that's doing is just making it so that like look, at some point we have to give up on the fact that you're not going to actually be able to come back again. In theory, we could actually increase that time now because like there's really no downside to it being that long or even longer. So that would give longer for the internet to recover. But I mean, I guess we just haven't kind of done one thing or the other. But the thing that's going to matter to you really is just the fact that after 100 milliseconds, instances paused, you're not going to die. And how long it takes before we like actually time your whole connection out is kind of not really as relevant anymore.
Awesome. That's super cool. I can't remember in whose interview you were talking about it, but you expressed some interest in racing again and saying that that's something you considered revisiting now. But obviously you were cognizant of the fact that it's not necessarily what's going to like bring people back or bring revenue to the company, right? And you are a company. So I wanted to suggest, have you thought about having a specific like battle pass maybe, or even one singular item for racing and telling people, look, if there's interest, we'll bring back things like Descent, etc. based on how much it sells for, then like the racing community can literally contribute as much or as little and as there is interest.
I think that's pretty interesting. I actually did have another idea like a long time ago, which I don't know, like this is a different idea, but we'll just see. I'm just going to see what you think about it, because we never actually did this, but it was a thing that I was interested in, and that was the idea of like effectively like pay to enter races, where it would be like, you know, like some number of cents to enter a race, and then you effectively, I mean, it's sort of similar to the thing that you were talking about there, I guess, except that instead of being for a whole season, it was just like individual races. And that was kind of an interesting idea that I was thinking that maybe people would be interested in, but I wasn't quite sure whether the community would like that or not. Like it kind of wasn't clear to me, and so we were thinking like, oh, like 5 points to enter a race, and then because of the fact that the rewards, so then effectively the rewards of the race would have to be like cosmetics, right? Because obviously we can't give you rewards in the form of anything that would be player power, given that you need to pay MTX currency to enter.
Oczywiście.
So but effectively the
Cześć,
the original
Fanaty.
race rewards were alt art uniques anyway, and like effectively if we
Oj,
removed the
dzisiaj za
actual
dużo
part, we get the
newsów.
actual unique out of it. In theory, we could do like skins and stuff like that as part of the rewards. So we kind of discussed that, but I wasn't like whether I was just like very uncertain about whether the community would like hate this. So I'm kind of curious to hear your idea about what you think about it. I mean, the battle pass is similar, except that it's more of a like one-time purchase for a whole season, I assume.
Yeah, it's also I was thinking more of like even if it starts out with like a cloak that you buy that isn't like this wouldn't depend on you being able to play or not. This is like if you want to see more of this in the future. I'm more of a fan of free entry and then having a way for people to support and just being open with like
Tak,
if this is something you guys are interested in, this is how you can show that you're interested in it. If not,
Well, the battle pass thing, is sort of interesting because it already kind of is similar to how the racing structure was anyway. Where you get points, and then like at certain thresholds, you get you know, you get cosmetic.
Yeah.
So it actually probably does match more into it. I just mentioned the other one because it's something I thought of ages ago. Thought it would be interested to see. But you know, that is an interesting idea. Like the racing battle, it's actually a pretty cool idea. Like I'm interested in this for sure.
Cool.
The main issue really with that is just that the amount of bandwidth we have for making microtransactions, which is what we need to make for this, is honestly surprisingly low. Like we're so it's so ridiculous in some ways that like for a company that makes money from cosmetics that we don't have more people just working on that stuff.
Yeah.
But you know, we effectively need more to be able to create more stuff like that, and it's like to already get more people for making existing cosmetics. So I guess, you know, if we had infinite resources to make that stuff, I would absolutely do something like that. I think that's pretty interesting. So it's just a question of, you know, where we get the time.
Yeah, that's fair. Awesome. It's just I'm
Dzięki, poturbowany, dzięki. Jedziemy. Siemano
I
w ogóle.
have a question
Cześć,
from a
Roman.
community member in full caps lock.
Sweet.
How do
Always the
character
best way.
names? How do character names work? Is it the same as PoE1 or is it #1254 where multiple people can be the same name? So obviously, like our accounts are
Yeah.
hashtag now. Are our names still unique?
So we decided to just keep the names the same way they worked before in PoE1.
Okay.
For now at least. And the reason why is because so with account names, you never really have to refer to account names very much while actually typing.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't have had to worry about all the concerns that come around having to like know people's discriminators and having to like worry about all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
With character names, there's a few other details. So one of them is that they expire. So you don't have the problem where the space just exists. I assume you knew that about character name expiration. Because
I thought that was just done in waves.
it's not done in waves. So effectively, 1 year after the character name is
Będę szybki, patrol, będę szybki.
goes into a pool of names that someone else could create if they want to, and if they then do that, then the name gets expired for you.
Jak starczy się sezon, to zakładam od razu jagódki Nadina i zbieramy całą gildię, mordy. Na Discordzie jest już zakładka PoE, więc ładujcie się na Discorda, każdy kto będzie chciał grać razem i jedziemy. Od razu robimy jagódki też w PoE. I jak coś to będę wykupywał będę wykupywał miejsca dodatkowe. Bo to dla nas
Account
wszystkich.
names do. And as I said, the character names will be more annoying because that's kind of how you know, that's kind of how you refer to people within League. So we kind of decided to do that. That being said, if it became like a real problem, I'm open to the idea of doing the whole discriminator on character name thing. It's just that it would mean that you'd have to then have a situation where it's like, whenever you're doing a whisper, you'd have to like know, like, because you have to have like autocomplete for this, right? Like you can't have discriminate autocomplete, and then that means you have to have the whole thing of like, okay, are they in your friends list, are they in the guild, are they in your party, have they talked in chat recently, have they whispered you recently, like all of that stuff would have to go in the pool of things that you autocomplete for. And I mean, look, it's like how Discord used to be, right, when it had stuff. So there's basically just a bunch of work that you'd have to do there, and I mean, we could do that stuff if we felt like we needed to, but we're going to try without for the time being.
Cool.
And see how that goes, and like if it's like a real problem, then we can always change it.
There are some audio issues, by the way. I don't know if the mic's too far away or something, but you're cutting out a little bit.
I'll try that.
Cześć Pablo. Nie, nic nie zrobią. Ale my już zrobiliśmy wszystko, wygraliśmy. Pokazaliśmy i to o to chodziło. Zapraszam do filmu o boterach D3. Afera boterowa. Polecam, uśmiejecie się. Wykrzyknik boterzy.
Or is it like fresh start from everyone and there will be a character in PoE1 and a character in PoE2?
Yeah, so the characters are separated in PoE1 and 2. The databases are just completely independent. So you'll have to race to get that one, I guess.
All right, I'm not getting that one. Cool.
No to oczywiste raczej.
So, a few other questions about runes. So, runes, they're obviously like replacing the crafting bench. And
Runy.
Sure, yep.
in a way. And can you override them? Like, can I put in a new one over it if I want to change later?
You can't. So that's something that I guess we could potentially do, though. Like, I don't think I'm against it. I'd actually have to talk to Rishi and Mark about whether or not we'd want to allow that. But currently, you can't, at least.
So, yeah, I'm very curious about this because from my understanding, one of the main reasons that you wanted to remove sockets from gear was that you really wanted to have this new thing where you find a gear upgrade, you don't need to six-link it, you don't need to like get it exactly how you need it to be, you can just equip it. But I feel like
ready to go.
I actually love the concept of runes, but I feel like a little bit about how they systematically work sort of ends up canceling this, right? Where I will not be able to actually pick up an item and wow, this is an upgrade. I will have to fix my runes. Maybe I have to farm them.
I see what you mean, but I don't think it's the same because the thing with so a couple of things with this. One of them is that when we're talking about the whole like picking up an item and having to change stuff, what that was mostly around is the idea that okay, like socket colors and so on, right? Like it meant that you had to change like. Either you have to chromatic stuff until the point where like you've actually got exactly what you had before, or you have which is like definitely way more annoying than having to just use a couple of currency items on your on your item, right? Like chromaticking to get to the right state like could be very difficult. But or the other thing you might have to do is to just rearrange everything in your character and like, oh, this goes here, that goes there. Like I use different supports or something like that, right? So to me, that was like a much more arduous process than what this is, because effectively you're going to have the currency that allows you to add sockets to items. It's not hard to get that currency. Like in the early game, it's a little bit more restricted, but effectively you're definitely going to buy, as you go through the game, you're going to have that currency in abundance, I would say. So I don't think it's like necessarily a problem like doing that. But sorry, I felt like you were about to say something there.
Yeah, so especially with resistances and stuff, I'm still a little bit worried about this because you don't have the ability to change that later.
So effectively, in terms of fixing resistances, the sockets are more of a thing that you would be worried about early game for those kinds of stats. When I say early game, I kind of mean like during the campaign, right? Because during the campaign, you're like, okay, I've got low on this resistance. I want to get another one of those. To me, at least, I've found that it's kind of not something that I'm too worried about overall, like as I'm changing items going up, because as you're going through the campaign, you're finding new base types, you're getting new things, you're kind of constantly upgrading, and it kind of hasn't really ended up being a thing where I'm worried about that. If you equip a new item and you're like, I lack this resistance, generally speaking, I'll like, oh, okay, well, I'll add another socket or two to this, and then I'll get the resistance rune out of my stash and use that. So it's kind of ended up being a thing where like just fixing that resistance tends to be a problem that you do after deciding to upgrade anyway. So that's kind of been okay. And it's worth mentioning that with the runes, because they're kind of like, so at early game, they're more powerful than they are at late game because the values, there's only one value of each for each type.
Yeah.
So that means is that like early game, the resistances you're getting from one of these resistance runes is like extremely...
Kurde, szacun, ty co, dobra. Dobra.
Into the game, the runes
Będziemy
are
w
less effective
Intouchu.
at solving that problem because the numbers are not stacking up compared to the mods you could get. And so as you get towards the later game, the things that you're going to be wanting to be socketing are more of the soul cores, which have the like different mods that aren't kind of designed to fix those early game problems. And also your character has more mods overall and is generally kind of like more in a good place. So it really is like, in terms of like fixing problems you have, it's more of a like, you know, first sort of 30, 40 levels kind of type deal rather than after that, if you know what I mean. So I think for that purpose, they work really, really well. As for changing them, I suppose we could allow it. I don't actually see a reason why we couldn't do that, although, as I said, I haven't talked to Mark and Rishi about it. But I guess the feeling here is that because you got to choose it, it's not quite the same as feeling like you need to be able to remove the mod that you would have from one of the random sources, where we have like some random ways to get rid of it. So that was kind of the reason why we're thinking that it can go the way that it has. But as I said, I don't think there's necessarily a downside to allowing you to replace it. So maybe that is fine. I just haven't thought all through all the repercussions of that yet.
Yeah, I mean, for example, like I normally play SSF. Well, I actually have been playing a little bit more trade lately, and especially for trade, right? You could see like a perfect item you want to buy.
Dziękuję, Astorial, dobrej nocki.
Garbage rune.
Dzięki wielkie.
So I could see that being an issue as well. It's definitely like I'm trying to go into PoE2 with the approach like, well, I haven't played it enough. I'll see how it is. But that is definitely something I'm very worried about, and hopefully something you'd be open to feedback with when we actually try it.
Right. I mean, I'm definitely always open to the feedback of that.
Yeah.
But as I said, I think from actually trying it myself, that hasn't been a problem I've run into particularly. But, you know, I guess we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. That's fair. How rare are like how rare are the rarest runes, basically?
So the runes themselves are not particularly rare. You get them fairly often. Like, I mean, you'll get, I mean, in Act 1, you'll find 4 or 5 of them probably, and then it only increases from there as you get more monster density and so on. So like you're finding them, and generally speaking, like if you're in Act 2, like maybe there'll be a rune that you want that you don't have, but then by the time you're in Act 3, I would say you probably have the runes that you need. Like they're generally available. It's really the soul cores that are the ones that are like the, you know, it's actually a struggle to find the ones you need of these, like because that's where the kind of, and you know, the higher level gameplay is.
Right. And would you say there are soul cores that are at the rarity of like Eternal Orb, Divine Orb, like that type of stuff?
I don't know the actual numbers, but I would definitely think so. Like, there's definitely there are definitely hard to find ones for sure.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. Next up, how does like stacking ailment works for like stacking multiple of the same?
Dobre pytanie.
Right. So effectively, so in general, ailments don't stack, right? In order to get the ability to stack them, there has to be some kind of mechanic you're getting.
Yep.
Okay.
Usually that mechanic will have some kind of like that mechanic may have some kind of explanation for like any specific details you have to be aware of. But I guess the main thing to understand is that if you're doing something like stacking poison, the way that works is that all of the poisons that you do will always be on the monster.
Yeah.
And they're all running, But whatever, if you've got the ability to stack 2 poisons, then whatever the 2 largest poisons that you currently have that are on there, those will be the active ones. And then when one of those falls off, then the next largest will take its place effectively. So that kind of means that like that's kind of, I believe, sort of generally how like buffs work in PoE, where you've got like, you know, whatever if you can have multiple buffs on a thing, but only one of them is active at a time. So in the case where you're allowed to have more than one, it's just effectively whatever the highest N buffs are that are on the character, that's the ones that you get effectively.
Cool. Well, that's good.
Yeah, so I don't know if there's anything else
Bardzo
you want to
fajnie,
know about
krótko,
that,
prosto
but,
wytłumaczone.
No, not that I can think of. I think that answers.
Krótka
that.
piłka.
That's pretty good.
sure, fair enough.
Another question from the community. Does mana and elemental leech exist?
Okay.
So mana leech is a thing, but only for attacks.
Yeah.
And elemental leech, I believe, is a thing. There are probably, I believe there are probably like various mechanics around that will give you elemental leech. It's definitely going to be a lot harder. But what we're trying to avoid is mana leech for spells. Because that can kind of like defeat a lot of mechanics and so on. So effectively, that's the main thing. Everything else is fair game, but we just have to, you know, like it just depends on where it comes from. So yeah, that's kind of the basic idea.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I know a lot of people are hoping for a spell mana leech, so.
Jak coś, to na YouTubie z rana będzie podsumowanie moje tego wszystkiego w pigułeczce. Także pamiętajcie, że macie plecy. Zrobimy filmik, będzie o 8 rano, podsumowanko w pigułeczce, także możecie zostawić subskrypcję. Materiały o PoE raczej każdego dnia, cały czas będziemy też grać, także tutaj macie linkacza do subskrypcji, warto być podpiętym i na bieżąco.
It may not be the most optimal thing to do, just because like the stuff you're sacrificing might be too much in order to do that.
Yeah.
Especially when you've got like conditional crit mechanics. Getting to 100% isn't so bad, but like you're not always going to be meeting those conditions, if you know what I mean. Yeah, I would say that like we've tried to kind of keep things a little bit more in line in terms of having more like, as I said, just like the controlling the sources a little bit better and kind of making sure that like getting to 100% is actually like a real like, as I said, possible, but kind of not expected. So I imagine the sort of expected crit would be a bit lower than that. And yeah, trying to increase beyond that is kind of not hugely valuable.
Okay. What's the main reason they're indifferent? Is that just to like retain player power and not let it get out of control early?
I wouldn't say that exactly. I think it's more just that like ideally every mechanic, so like I'm just I am generally in favor of the idea that like there's the decision to not increase something more is not because you run out of sources of it, but because like there's a reason that you don't want to do that, because the trade-offs are too much. And so effectively by keeping the values that you're kind of like can easily get to a sort of certain midpoint, you just avoid this, like you just sort of make it so you get that trade-off, like you have to make that trade-off towards the end of the range. So it's effectively like that. I think that's kind of really the main reason. Like it's been a little while since I talked about this with anyone, but yeah, like that's kind of really what it came down to. We just kind of wanted to make 100% crit more of a like, this is a very unusual situation rather than this is a common situation.
Okay.
Dzięki wielkie, Shizer. Piona. No i bardzo dobrze, Tycu. Bardzo dobrze.
Crit feels like the end game. Like you should go crit at some point, and you kind of want to avoid that as well. Is that part of it at all, or?
Well, we're certainly trying to make it so that crit is not the only build. There was actually a thing that we changed. So, you know, so here's a random thing for you. We actually had the change for a little while where so crit modifiers, and I need to get this correct. Like there are various crit suffixes in PoE1, and so there was this feeling that in PoE1 that if you're a crit build, you've got like you can make your build more powerful than what non-crit builds can, because the suffixes that are available to you as a crit build are like more powerful than what the suffixes are available to you as a not crit build.
JB, tak jest. Cześć, Curtis. O 8 rano zrobię pigułkę informacyjną o tym, wiesz? Także wpadaj na YouTube i będziesz miał to wszystko w pigułce. Dużo informacji, bardzo, bardzo ciekawych informacji. Zostawiajcie suby na YouTubie, bo warto, moi drodzy. Każdego dnia film.
We actually found that like it actually made weapon rolling way less fun. Like in theory, what it was doing was making it so that, okay, you could get a crit weapon or you could get like a not crit weapon, and like they were kind of competing with each other. And like, we did all the math and we're like, hey, look, now we've made it so that crit builds and non-crit builds are more in line with each other and they have the same level of power.
Jestem bardzo usatysfakcjonowany tym wywiadem. Zizaran zadaje, nie wiem czy oni się umówili wcześniej coś takiego, ale Zizaran zadaje bardzo dobre pytania jako progracz i bardzo znaczące pytania. Nie pierdolenie o Chopinie, o jakichś mało istotnych rzeczach typu grafika, muzyka, nie wiem, dialogi, fabuła, mechaniki, stackowanie, HC, zabezpieczenie graczy przed śmiercią na HC przez laga, piękne. Zaraz po streamie będę robił to samo, tylko w pigułce paręnaście minut, żebyście mieli informacje na 8 rano. Także jak ktoś pójdzie spać czy coś, to się nie przejmujcie, będę podpięty. Cześć Secior!
Some of the like possible power that you sort of can get from weapons, and I think that's sort of
Tak.
as I said, I think it's in a better place.
Same
I
konkrety
don't really
Java.
remember exactly how this was related to the original question anymore, but it was just something that came up in my mind.
Does that mean that at the high end,
Tak, Safto, to prawda.
dead suffixes? Like I remember life regen for a long time and thorns, right? Would be literally dead
You need
suffixes.
to you still want to have suffixes where when
Dzięki Secior, dzięki.
you need to have bad rolls.
Ja to wiewiór na rano przygotuję po polsku, bardzo szybkie, konkretne info.
That there are actually things that
Także nic się nie przejmuj. Na razie sobie oglądaj mordeczki
the
piękne.
highest tier of something needs to be something you actually would be excited to see. And there are actually a couple of cases where we
Sołał nie jest trudna.
the tiering
Moim
system
zdaniem
for
nie jest
mods,
trudna, po
for
prostu ludzie się za bardzo boją, zamiast skupić na fanie.
5 just goes up to 5, like T5 rares. When you actually, if you actually get a T5 rare, it's actually possible because we haven't got some of the mods. Like light radius, for example, they don't actually have an eye level. There's no light radius mod that's higher than eye level, like 60 something, I think it is. It's probably like the highest one. It's actually possible that on the highest tier content with a tier 5 rare, that the dead mods like that are actually cut out of the mod pool completely. So it's actually possible that for that to be the case. Now, tier 5 rares are like rare as hen's teeth, right? They're actually like incredibly rare. When you get one of those,
Będziemy
like, you know
chłącić
the
za
mods on those are
nimi.
gonna be really good because like you know
Już
the eye
niedługo.
level mods you're gonna get is like higher
I'm
than
so
a certain
excited
amount.
for that.
Okay, so like that means that there are
Tak,
just,
Kart,
really,
sis,
yeah,
tak.
some really
I o tym też będę miał jutro film.
yeah, it's once again, can't remember where I was going with this, but this is like a thing that exists for the rare system. So the that can mean that some of the rares you can get on the higher tiers can be very good.
Awesome. Very, very cool. I'm very excited to hear that. Like items is like my favorite thing in ARPGs, so definitely looking forward to that. I want to continue asking about crit.
Crit.
Enemy crit in Path of Exile 1 can be a little bit weird with, especially like, let's say multi, like the Valspark from like Tynvin or whatever he's called, or the Shaper Balls and stuff, because either the entire ability crits or none of it crits. Is enemy crit functioning similar in PoE2, or is it to the individual projectile?
So I don't think we've made any changes here, but I believe that the way that works is determinable by the designers as they're working on it. But I suspect it's one of those things that they probably don't necessarily always think about because it's kind of it's sort of somewhat invisible, you know, like so it's one of those things that just probably just doesn't come up in their minds. So we can control that, and I don't know whether or not. And as I said, the system
Nie
works with-
potrafię odpowiedzieć na to pytanie. Jak Jonathan nie zna odpowiedzi na pytanie, to też jest mega uroczy.
situations that use one or the other.
Zbyt skomplikowane pytanie Zaran zadał. Nie mają
Out of interest, do you prefer,
przygotowanej odpowiedzi na
so
to.
do you prefer just every projectile? I assume every projectile is what you'd prefer.
I'd way prefer every projectile. Obviously, now I usually will end up building for crit immunity instead, and that's fine.
Right.
But I remember when I was a new player to Path of Exile, and suddenly I'd be standing next to the Valspark Exile, and it would just explode, and I'm like, what just happened? And somebody
Right.
would like watch my clip, and they're like, oh yeah, he crit you, you're gone.
Right. I have a feeling that I mean, I suppose the question would be whether we should make per projectile the default option. It's one of those things that like I don't see a reason why we wouldn't. I'd have to talk to Mark about it. But yeah, that's probably reasonable. I think that the whole ability critting all at once is the default for some reason.
Yeah.
I think. So I'm pretty sure that if you run into that, it's because the designer forgot to add the stat that makes it so that it's just every projectile
Right.
to that particular ability. So yeah, that's just kind of one of those random things. But for player skills, it's like one of those things that we really have to think very carefully about.
Yeah.
Because there are kind of reasons.
Dzięki Nexua, siemano.
This is Rain of Arrows. It's like should every projectile crit or should every projectile not crit? Now, because right now every projectile has its own crit roll, it means that if you use like Sniper's Mark on a monster, and then you do Rain of Arrows on that monster, then you're almost guaranteed to crit it at some point just because it hits so many times.
Yeah.
And that means that effectively the sniper's mark is like using it with Rain of Arrows is just like a complete win because you just incredibly likely to actually trigger that. And so then it's kind of like, well, should we make it instead so that ability is like crit, the whole ability crits or doesn't crit? But then the problem with that is that it just feels super weird. Like there's something odd about the feeling of like I do a critical Rain of Arrows and then you start to think like, should it look different so you can see that the whole Rain of Arrows is critting? Or I don't know.
Right.
It kind of just has some weird implications. So we kind of decided not to do it in the end. But
Yeah.
there is a reason why
Okay.
we have both the abilities to do in different situations.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I'm definitely a lot less concerned about the intricate workings of how player crit works.
Jak tam Nexus, zamierzasz coś poeliznąć, czy na razie olewasz temat?
Yeah. No, it's a tricky one.
Jestem tak usatysfakcjonowany tym wywiadem.
I would be interested. I should talk to Mark about whether or not we should just have a policy in general of just everything a monster does is always individual roles. Like,
Yeah.
there might be a reason he's against that, but I'd be interested to find
I'm
out.
curious. How
Oczywiście, że nie da się wiedzieć. Nie mam nic do tego, nie? Bardziej urocza reakcja, to jest piękne, bo już zauważyłem to wcześniej. Panie. PoE to nie dla mnie, no tak właśnie myślałem, nie? Że raczej nie twoja giereczka.
variable because like there's some abilities that like
A mnie ostatnio bierze cały czas na WoWa, ale nie jest to dobry czas na WoWa HC. Klasyka.
and then suddenly you get
Right, right,
lucky
right.
with a big crit
Nie
and
ma
you're like, oh,
czasu.
never mind. So yeah, I'm just curious how you
Widziałem filmy ze spolszczeniem o WoWie HC. Coś bąko mi się wczoraj wyświetliło, szalałem przez chwilę.
Well, okay, so mods. I think it's nice to have mods personally. I think because I like to have situations where you've got the ability to like it gives us an access to because what having mods does like on maps and so on is the ability to make it so that a boss fight can feel different from a different time you fought it just based on what the mods were. So I think that stuff's important. That being said, we did like the idea of having the static bosses for the top pinnacle content just because that is a measuring stick that players can use against each other. So having that be like a static thing is kind of nice.
Yeah.
So that's why I like the mods. As for the crits, I can see your point for sure. Like that is an interesting point. Like, should we crit at all for bosses?
yeah, I was just curious.
I guess I don't really have I just don't really have like. I honestly don't really have an argument for why they should. To be honest, I guess the main thing would be just to make sure we've got enough variance. But then the answer would be, well, why do the players probably don't want the variance? Yeah, I don't know. I find that to be interesting. It's not something that I've really thought about too much, I have to admit. I see your point about not wanting to have the crits for sure. It's probably something that I'll have a chat to Mark about.
Yeah, I was just very, very curious about the answer there because obviously, like, we can just get crit immunity, but the feeling for me there is it almost makes it mandatory.
Right.
And I feel like in general.
Taty, co oni tam mogą się ewentualnie za armatkę swoją chwycić, kurwa, lewą ręką.
It usually gets like changed to remove.
Right.
Rod Ferguson tam może se za armatkę się chwycić.
Involved basically, like it's another like it's an axis of character development that we're removing. Like that's probably the argument that would be made against it. So then the question is, but I agree with you that if something's mandatory, then it's kind of like, maybe.
Wiem, Depeche, no, słyszałem. Essa. Niech się słowo niesie.
Point taken, right? Like this is an interesting one to me, and I'll talk to the guys about it.
Ziggy wrote something really cool that I like. Let me see if where'd it go? Enemy crits should be conditional buffs you can see to and react to. I think that would be really cool. Like,
Right.
Let's say that let's use Shaper Slam as an example, right? That if the Shaper Slam is about to crit, it like changes the animation and becomes maybe a bit slower.
Right.
That would be really
makes sense.
cool. Because that does
Right.
change the fight, but like I love that.
Yeah.
That'd be way
Okay,
cool.
well, that's interesting. Okay.
It's for me I guess for me the big thing is that like they look exactly the same. You have no idea if it's gonna crit or not.
Yeah. No, I agree. That's a very good argument. Like it is a very good point. I'd be interested to hear if Mark has any particular reason against that. Maybe he doesn't. Like it is a very interesting point.
Dudes, no to będzie PoE z Diablo z innymi rzeczami wokół, bo się chwytamy coraz więcej tematów. Na pewno będzie na kanale jakieś moje poradniki, jak tylko przegram grę i tak dalej. Także o PoE, no na pewno już teraz w tym momencie jest poematyczny. Także zachęcam do subskrypcji. Jutro rano od razu po streamie siadam do tego. Jutro przygotuję a propos tego pigułę informacyjną, taką na 8. Także się spodziewajcie i PoE2, tak, będzie darmowe. Tylko że niestety dopiero za pół roku, rok, a póki co jak chcesz grać wcześniej 6 grudnia, to musisz minimalnie $30 zapłacić, no ale też dostajesz ekwiwalent 1:1 w postaci monet, które i tak będziesz chciał kupić, jeżeli się wciągniesz w grę. No bo potrzebujesz tam stash upgrade. Cześć Chudzia, jak się ma?
So I would say that like for that, like we still have
No, spoko by było Cejlo.
and
Z
stuff like that
insightami.
that can give people bonuses. But I would say that support characters in PoE2 are more along the lines of like I'm debuffing monsters.
Nie wiadomo czy za rok, ale na pewno dłużej niż pół roku im to zejdzie, bo to mówili, a ponieważ lubią w grudniu raczej robić jakieś rzeczy, albo też przyzwyczaili się do tego, że w grudniu no dużo ludzi kupowało sobie support paki, no nie? Na święta, to strzelałbym, że to będzie coś koło grudnia za rok. Ale wiemy tylko, że więcej niż pół roku.
That other people can use or like
Dokładnie.
or
Chyba, że dlatego mówię, że minimalnie $30.
so that other people can take advantage of that, things like that. So I'd say that like that's kind of the role of that kind of stuff more.
I
But
do
what we
łazienki,
don't
ale
have is just
słucham.
like I just reserve everything and like I'm just like an aura, like just a bunch of auras on my character, and that's kind of all I'm doing. So that's the kind of thing that we don't really have in the same way.
Cool. Awesome. I think that generally answers that. Next up, a little bit of a discussion of something that was brought up in a previous podcast. I have in my notes there, talk about respecking ascendancies. I don't know if that's something you've like thought about or talked about more after the podcast with, I believe it was Troy.
Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to talk more about this. But I mean, look, as I said, it's still on my mind as something that I know players are concerned about. So like we will definitely have another conversation about it for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's really anything else to say about it at the moment.
Perfect. All right. Yeah, that's it. I'm obviously very pro respecting ascendancy. So
yeah,
my argument would just be it's a very early place to make a permanent decision.
Sure, I understand.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. On to endgame like mapping and things like that. How much more rewarding should a difficult map mod like penetration or something like that be compared to chill ground or monster variety?
So, I believe that so it's a very different situation in PoE2 than PoE1 for this stuff because the rewards from difficult mods are not necessarily like the rewarding part of the map mods because we've got the thing where the prefixes are like the rewards mods and the suffixes are the like bad mods. It means it's kind of separated those two things out a little bit more.
Yeah.
Now there is still a thing where the harder mods have waystone drop rate increases on them, and so I believe I believe that the harder mods there do affect that, but I don't think that is like quite so much of a big deal compared to how it was in PoE1 where like the item drops were heavily changed by that stuff. So like I don't know that like as I said it's a very different situation. Now this is one of those things that I'm like I really hope it works, but I don't know if it will. So I guess we'll sort of have to see. Like the dynamics of what people choose to roll and how people respond to that are going to be very interesting. I guess we'll just see how that goes. But what it does mean, at least with the current way the system works, is that it doesn't matter quite so much what the the numbers we choose for how difficult those things are relative to like the rewards they give, because as I said, the rewards being given are mostly from the prefixes anyway. So yeah, I guess that's kind of related to that.
Cool. Yeah, no, I was just curious because somebody brought up the point that I think it was penetration and monster variety had basically the same rewards, so I was curious there. So that'll be interesting to see how that changes. What about things like /letter? Is that going to be the same or different?
It's the same for now. Look, we could probably do better with this. Like, it's funny because before we /ladder was a temporary cheat we added before PoE1 was released as a temporary thing before we added the ladder screen. and then now we're releasing PoE2 and we still haven't implemented the ladder screen. Like it's kind of absurd how that works. We originally intended to have an in-game ladder screen, and then I guess the website kind of had it, and then we just never got around to actually implementing UI for it. So all I could say is like, okay, it's been 15 years, but we're still intending to make a ladder screen in game one day.
All right, so 15 years from now.
Yeah, sure.
Chudziak? Nie, tam ci na utkane już siedzą, wiesz?
Okay, good to know. And,
Dzień dobry.
What about, would it be possible at all for the community to get a more detailed API for things like that, like ladder and like making your own tools?
Spoko
I'm
by
curious
było.
what more you'd want out of the ladder for the API, because effectively I believe that the API we have right now just gives you a full dump of the first, like, I don't remember how many it is like 10,000 or something like that. There's like some number of people in the ladder that it gives you, and as far as I know, it gives you everything you would need to have. So
Cześć,
what else do you want, right?
Iforito, siemaneczko.
Like if you want something else, so I can add it.
Yeah. Okay. Oh my God. We can get you a list. So obviously, like I'm,
Sure.
yeah, it's a long time since I started computer science, so I don't have a list in front of me. But things I can think of off the top of my head would be boss kills, for example, right? For the events we do, that is one of the biggest things we want.
Oj,
Like,
tak.
oh, so you want a ladder for when? Oh, you want like a different ladder for when people have killed them?
PoE tak robimy. Dzisiaj dzień PoE, potem będziemy też oglądać trochę PoE, także plany się zmieniły, ale bardzo dobrze. Bardzo dużo nowych informacji. Jutro rano, od rana walimy filmikami. Rano o 8 będzie pigułka tego najnowszego wywiadu, który zaczął się godzinę temu z Zaranem. Bardzo ciekawe info. Najbardziej się jaram info o HC, także na YouTubie czekajcie. Tutaj macie linkacza. I myślę, że jutro 2 filmy będą o PoE, bo dużo się dzieje, trzeba omawiać tematy i za 4 dni lecimy. Subcio, no pewnie, że tak, lecimy.
I have a feeling that the way that's implemented internally is there's just like effectively the amount of time until you kill the given boss, like as a separate ladder effectively, and then that would mean that like you.
Rozmawiałem o laderach w zabitych bossach. Chcielibyście taki lader, w którym powiedzmy musicie, znaczy macie rubrykę właśnie w PoE2 z bossami, szybkość zabicia bossa i tak dalej, i tak dalej. Ja bym w to wjeżdżał od razu. Chyba top 1. Jakieś inne ladery, może SZF, czy coś takiego, jasne, ale to jest coś na zasadzie challenge dungeonów albo po prostu no challenge bossów, że czym szybciej zabijesz, efektywniej, motywuje też do farmy, żeby mieć jak najlepszy build, jak najbardziej zoptymalizowany, popycha do limitów. No challenge, speedruny i tak dalej są genialne, tak jak mówię, ja na pewno będę wjeżdżał, jeżeli gra się przyjmie, a raczej tak, z tego co widzę, jeżeli nic się nie zmieni, to na pewno po poznaniu gry lekko wlatujemy w wyzwania i wlatujemy w speedruny. Chcę poznać tile, jakby wiem, że w PoE 1 było generowanie proceduralne map. Było to bardzo Diablo-like'owe, więc tutaj też na pewno, znaczy liczę, że w PoE 2 będzie podobnie, no. Nie sądzę, żeby schodzili z
For like first
jakości.
to level, first to new areas and stuff. During the early access?
Yes, so I think that we have. So the leveling one, I think we only do it every 5 levels, at least for the first while, just because we don't want it to be like super spammy.
Yeah.
And for first to enter area, I think that. I don't remember exactly how that was going to be. Because there was also some concern. I mean, look, there is definitely going to be stuff like that. But I think that we just wanted to try and reduce the spam a little bit in some cases.
Yeah.
Certainly you want like first to reach level, like past level like 65 or something. You probably want like everything above that to be like every single level, I would say. Just because like, you know, that's pretty important race and it takes a bit longer up there. So we've got stuff like that. I don't think there's any first to kill. Well, maybe there are first to kill bosses for the act bosses or something. I'm not. I don't remember the exact situation, but there's definitely some of that stuff. We just wanted to make sure it didn't seem like completely incomprehensible for like a bunch of new players who are seeing all the stuff for the first time. So yeah, we just kind of wanted to limit it a little bit.
Very cool. I love to hear that. A question from my community was, are there going to be free respecs during the EA if there's a big enough change? Like right now, if there's a huge skill tree change on standard, you get like the free
Powinni
respec.
zrobić,
Yeah.
tak, tak.
So I'd say it's probably going to be the same as that effectively. Like when we do a big change, everyone will get a free respec and it'll work that way
Oczywiście,
pretty much.
oczywiście,
Cool.
oczywiście.
Yeah, somebody was particularly concerned because of its respecing. Is it only gold or do you have silver gray orbs? I can't remember.
No regret anymore, it's just gold.
Oj tak, piątek, sobota, niedziela, prawdopodobnie w piątek 6 grudnia odpalamy stream z PoE2 i kończymy w niedzielę dopiero. 40 godzin grania, no. Myślę, że tak, oj tak.
Yeah, like the big patches that do the big balance stuff, we should get some. Now that being said, like I'm not going to say that every single like there will probably be patches where we nerf some particular thing and then like, you know, that could hurt.
24, co? 48 około. Jak jest beta ladder, to ja gram pierwsze 2 dni z 38 godzin na lajcie przypadkowo. 24 to ja wciągam nosem, chłopie. Znaczy to zły dobór słów w tym momencie, ale mówię, wystarczy kolka zero. Nie, ja kole zero piję, nie z cukrem. Leciutko. No, z tym nosem nie... Niefortunne, ale spokojnie. Ja tutaj suplementuję się jedynie kawą i kolą zero. Ale Agusia koniecznie z cukrem. Boże, nie z cukrem, tylko z kofeiną, bo jak już myślę o coli, to mi się słabo robi.
Items can be supported. So logical
Z
follow-up is
kofeinką,
how
no.
many sockets to those
Złota banderolka nej, kofeina jej.
skills show you how many sockets
Tak
they have.
jest.
So if you have stuff that's inherent to your character, so that is to say, like ascendancy.
Dokładnie. Wypominam boterom granie 22,5 godziny, a sam będę leciał 48. No uczę się czegoś od nich, nauczyłem się czegoś od nich, spuściznę mi dali.
Now I don't remember.
W ogóle mam już kompa nowego dzisiaj, dostałem kompa właśnie już na PoE2. Z Tycem instalowaliśmy, znaczy Tycu mnie gajdował, jak tam poskładać go, bo ja wiele ręce do roboty. Były jaja, Tycu może powiedzieć, były jaja, dlatego dzisiaj w nocy będziemy to robić. Tycu mi przygotował paczkę, giga szacun dla niego, bez niego nie dam rady, zajebiście mi poogarniał wszystko.
The trade site needs like
Także jutro prawdopodobnie na nowym sprzęcie możemy się już widzieć. Na nowym sprzęcie.
about it looking exactly the same as in game, just because there's like a whole bunch of work there. But we definitely want to make sure the trade site at least shows you everything that you sort of need to know. So I don't know whether or not they will be showing the sockets in that are in skills in gear, and I have a feeling it probably won't, because I know that skills in general on the trade site are kind of like a bit like because there's like a ton of work to make them work the same as in game. I think we're just going to be showing like names and levels, so it probably won't show the sockets on the site, but you can know that effectively there's just certain eye levels that the item is that when it does that, and then later on we'll like improve support on the trade site and get everything rendering exactly the same as in game, and then that'll be fine. But there certainly should be nothing on the trade site which you can't know about something that's important for trade, at least, even to start with. Yeah.
Awesome. Quick follow-up on ascendancy questions. A
Hello,
lot of people
Koal.
asked me to ask, regardless of the answer. Are we going to have be able to see the full ascendancies before launch?
Nie, bo to będą
Good
spoilery.
question.
Pewnie nie, pewnie nie, pewnie nie.
Don't know whether that's in the spoiler list or not, actually. What we're not going to have is like support for it on the website, which we were planning on doing because we wanted people to like just have all that stuff there. But I think we didn't quite get time to implement all that stuff on the website to get that working.
Okay.
It's possible we can still get them to post the ascendancies early. I'll have to talk to the community team and see whether or not that's planned. We might be able to do that. I'll talk to the community team and see what their plan is for that.
It is pretty much a 50-50, by the way.
On whether or not people want that?
Oh yeah, a lot of people don't want it.
Right.
I
We
think
did show quite a lot about the ascendancies already, so like in some ways.
Dużo ludzi tego nie chce, bo to są spoilery tak jakby. A ludzie, chcą sobie odkrywać. Dużo ludzi chce sobie odkrywać i dużo ludzi też chce się przygotować przed tym. Ja na przykład mam w dupie spoilery. Ja bym chętnie przytulił takie wcześniejsze looki na ascendencję, ale tak czy siak sobie to odkryjemy. No the big deal. O, Litriel, jak milutko. Kamera 4K, w przyszłym roku kamera od razu.
is
Monitor.
a low life 50%.
Cześć, Dyziu.
No, it's 35.
35!
It's actually back to how it used to
Czyli low life to jest 35%, a dzisiaj się zastanawialiśmy, let's go.
reservation related stuff in PoE1, which is not a concern anymore. So that means low life can be 35 again, and
Okay.
that restores that to how it was before.
35
Okay,
low
interesting.
life.
Yeah, I was really curious about that. We were trying to figure out what it was. Cool. Force move, is that something that can be a keybind instead of taking up a skill slot?
So it works the same way as PoE1. I guess that the thought with that is just like most people probably want force move on left click anyway, right?
Oczywiście.
Not
Ja
necessarily.
bym sobie zbindował na W.
Maybe not. Like I suppose.
Tak jak w Diablo 3, bind na W na przykład.
But hang on, can't you? Okay, so can't you change like? Because you know the skill binds that are like
clicker.
control W and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like you can control you can change those to not be using control, right?
Yes, you can change all your keybinds. The main issue for a lot of people right now is they would like to have in just keybind settings force move to be like whether you put it on mouse button 1 or not. Right now it's costing you a skill slot, and we're already a little bit for some builds a little bit
Right.
short on that.
I would have thought that when you include the control, like they're more inconvenient, but like the control Q, control W, that kind of stuff, those ones, like, are you really using all of those as well? 'Cause I feel like you could just use the like skill slot pin or whatever the last one is, like at the end there, and then use that one as your force move, and then just rebind it to something that doesn't require precision control. And then if you do that, you should be able to use that. But like, I mean, I guess there's no real reason we couldn't change it to not use a skill slot potentially. But I guess I figure that it's not usually a problem at the moment if you're able to do that.
A lot of people want that.
No.
Okay, interesting. Well, I mean,
Dobrze, że Zaran to poruszył. Ja też bym wolał mieć tego nie jako skill.
Size, but I polled the people watching on Twitch right now, and 77% are saying they do want to know. I actually thought it would be more people against.
Interesting.
Yeah.
A propos ascendencji, 77% ludzi wolałoby znać ascendencję. O kur... Ja też.
Curious. Right. I would like to hear a little bit more about towers. And like buffing the
Endgame,
maps and like
sure.
If you can talk about that a little bit, because a bit before, the vibe I was getting as a player, it's felt a little bit like synthesis like, where I would be like trying really hard to maximize my area and buffing it up, and that could maybe sound a little tedious. So yeah, I would just love to hear you talk about towers more.
Derdunio, tak, piątek atak, robimy gildię Jagódki Nadina i będę dokupywał po prostu cały czas sloty, tak żeby nigdy się nie skończyły. Nie wiem, czy jest jakiś limit zakupów, slotów gildyjnych, ale postaram się, że kto będzie chciał, ten będzie w gildii. Na Discorda już wbijajcie, przygotowujemy się. Czy więcej osób, tym lepiej. Tam jest zakładka PoE i jedziemy. I jechaneczka. I wbijajcie też na YouTube'a, subskrybujcie koniecznie, bo każdego dnia już teraz będzie film, przynajmniej jeden o PoE. Będziemy cały czas podpięci, no i też streamy z PoE będą na YouTubie i na Twitch TV na Wings.
You know, that would have gotten buffed?
Nie, HC mnie nie interesuje, zwłaszcza w grze, której nie znam. Dla mnie to jest, no nie chcę marnować czasu, bo dla mnie to jest marnowanie czasu osobiście, bo musisz ginąć, no bo nie znasz gry. A fajne wyzwanie, nie neguję, nie dla mnie po prostu. Ja chcę jak najwięcej odkryć gry i Endgame też odkryć, także gram na SC-ku i solo self-found. Ale solo self-found. Jeżeli będzie tryb solo self-found, a wydaje mi się, że mówili, że będzie, to... Tylko, że ja gram SSF. Ja gram całkowicie sam, żeby poznać grę najlepiej i mieć satysfakcję. Ale guildmatesi, będzie to potężna gildia. Jagódki Nadina będą potężne. Gram Witchem, Shizer pod Infernal.
And then once you've done that, you get the overlapping radii for the mods, and then you run them. So effectively works like that.
Ja też Quicker Infernalistka, mamy to samo. No, to jedziemy.
Towers multiple times?
No, you can't. So just one time each.
Honestly, it's hard because again, I haven't played, which I love. I haven't played. I would just like, do you like it? Like, is it fun? Like, is it something you're confident that you think people will enjoy?
I mean, I think it's pretty fun.
Yeah,
I think it's pretty fun, but it's kind of like, look, it's one of those things we'll just have to see how it works in some ways. Like, what we don't really know is like what the long-term feel of it is, like when you actually really ramp everything to like max and with, you know, but like what's the steady state like once you've reached the like point of just grinding forever? And that I sort of have a hard time knowing. Like we haven't done like the amount of time we need to invest to be able to really test that is like more than what we have. So it's kind of hard for us to know that. But the actual just like when you just play it normally, like it's cool. Like it does work well, and I'm enjoying that. The hard part, yeah, as I said, the hard part to know will be like once you've got infinite resources and you could just like, you know, you've got as much as you got, will it feel bad then? And I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
I'm hoping not though. There are generic tablets as well, by the way, that don't relate to a specific mechanic. And those ones like add more general mods that just sort of affect all maps. So that's another thing as well, just so you know. So we've got that too.
That's very fun.
And I am sure that we're going to be playing around a lot with the mod pools and other things like this, and sort of like, you know, like affecting the juicing experience is definitely something that needs a lot more actual testing to really know like how far that goes and how well it works. So I'm sure that will be an area that receives heavy balance
Cool.
as we're going through. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's the beauty of doing early access, I guess.
Right.
I was yesterday on a podcast called Dropped Frames. And Ko and JP asked Ezekiel to make them a question for today's podcast that I said I would ask them. And Ezekiel asked, why was it a conscious choice to make the game more difficult than PoE1?
Nie rozumiem. Czemu stworzyli trudniejszą grę niż PoE1? PoE1, co?
See, I guess I don't know that I would say that the conscious choice was to make the game more difficult as the because that makes it sound like the goal is we're going to make it more difficult, whereas what the goal was to make the combat more engaging, and on some level that did make the game more difficult. But I wouldn't say that was like this is what we're setting out to do, if you know what I mean. It's like we're setting out to make the combat good, and to me at least, good combat involves some level of challenge, and so that's kind of what you end up with.
Tak. Difficulty,
No,
wiem.
that's what it really comes down to.
Myślałem, że ogólnie takie pytanie, czemu PoE2 jest trudniejsze od PoE1, miałem takie, what?
Cool.
Chodzi o
I
trudność.
think that's really what it is.
Yeah,
Okay.
engaging combat.
Cześć
That makes
Bebe,
sense.
cześć nieogolony. Dzisiaj
The cat
PoE.
in the community asked, will every attack from rapid fire give stacks of tailwind?
Dzisiaj gadamy o PoE, wiesz, nieogolony, bo bardzo dużo nowych informacji jest. A ponieważ no, my odpalamy się na PoE no nieziemsko i gramy w Diablo 3 do wyjścia PoE, no to PoE to jest prio. Mega jestem zadowolony z tego streama, jest strasznie dużo ciekawej informacji. O 8 będzie piguła rano, mój filmik, przygotuję wam film na YouTube o 8 z najważniejszymi moim zdaniem rzeczami, zmianami. Ale kurde, jakby zapobieganie śmierci na HC, nie? Jezus, aż normalnie mnie to motywuje, żeby zagrać HCK i myślę, że na pewno to przetestujemy. Mam nadzieję, że nie będziemy testować, jak działa to dobrze, ale ja pierdolę.
He's someone so
Cześć
motivated
Chevy.
after doing
Cześć Chevy, jak tam botujesz? Jak tam pracowałaś pewnie dzisiaj? 30 godzin? Dzisiaj cały internet grzmi. A propos tego filmu. Podobno już jest rura
I think I won't
potężna.
be happy, you know what I mean? Like I just want to keep going. Like I was never fully happy with PoE1. There was always more to do. It's always like, you know.
No nie, Curtis, co ty gadasz? Ja będę grał w PoE w bluzie Diablo. Dlaczego? Bo PoE2 to Diablo-like.
I'll just keep going until I've achieved that, right? And maybe that's impossible to like make something really truly perfect, but like I guess I'm just ultimately motivated.
Nikogo nie zbanowali, nie zbanują, ale cały internet wie, że po prostu jak wygląda topka, wie, że... Znaczy cały internet, co znaczy cały internet? Więc z tego co słyszałem, Kiszak właśnie oglądał, także roznosi się i bardzo dobrze. Głosimy słowo faktów i prawdy. Zainteresowani ludzie Diablo będą wiedzieć, że rekordy w Diablo 3 nic nie znaczą i dodatkowa ciekawostka, jak oszuści rozumują i jak w swojej bańce no jakby akceptują to, jaka akceptacja tam poszła tego i normalizacja no czegoś, co powinno być totalnie hańbiące, nie? Jest niesamowite.
By the time you're like 3 areas in, so
Okay.
but we'll see. We'll see.
Damn.
Sami się Chevy rozjebali tak naprawdę. Ja właśnie tam nic nie musiałem. Prosta robota była. Prosta robota.
I think that would be. I think it probably would really not be hardcore viable. Just
Ale tak było zawsze Love and Hate. Nie no, Love and Hate, to, że zginiesz na HC-ku, to przenosić na SC, to jest normalna mechanika PoE1. Bardziej chodzi o to, żeby zostać na HC, to nie jest nic nowego. Bardziej chodzi o to, żeby zostać na HC i w momencie, kiedy dostaniesz disconnecta, to no to wiesz, jak dostaniesz disconnecta, no to gra się cała, wszystkie mechaniki się zapauzują. Tak ma być, bo to jest niesamowite. W Diablo 4 też takie miało coś być i wszystkich wypierdalało całkowicie do grobu, jak był jakiś lag.
What I would say is, if you were like playing behind someone and every single boss fight you like watched a video of someone playing it first.
Oj, na konsoli to już w ogóle. No, na konsoli tam są szczytowane itemy. Chevy, pomogłeś? No troszeczkę. No tak!
The first time yourself, so that I would say you can do. So
Very cool.
yeah, that's I would say play softcore your first time, or at
No
least
tak,
play
Logan,
hardcore and
tak,
die,
tak,
and
tak.
then play softcore the rest, and you should be alright.
Yeah. No, I was actually like bouncing between which one I should do, and then it was finally Ben that convinced me that I should play softcore because of server issues. And I think that obviously that is something we're all concerned about. So
I have a feeling like if there are server issues, it probably won't be that like it's like lag server side on the individual like on an individual instance, it's much more likely to be like back-end problems, which like boot off to, 100,000 people get booted off kind of thing. That's
Right.
kind of like a different type, rather than like a, like, oh, it's just crappy performance. Like I would hope anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
you never really know, but like I just have a feeling it was much more likely to be those kinds of problems, like the like horrible back-end issue that I have to get up before at 2 a.m. to work out, rather than the like just slow grind.
Yeah. How
But hopefully we're able to solve that issue.
how confident are you feeling?
Like, it's hard. Apparently not very. If I'm.
Yeah.
The issue is just like.
Jonathan jest
I
zajebisty,
really
uwielbiam
have no idea
gościa.
how many people will turn up on day one. Like we can look at supporter pack sales and we can say like, okay, well, there's at least this number, but on day one, we're not sure. And the other thing as well is that there are things like, what's console going to be like? I just don't know really.
Yeah.
Like how many people will turn up there. It's really hard to say. It's very hard to feel confidence even though we're doing a bunch of testing and things like that, just because like, as I said, it's a new game, you never know what's going to happen. Like launches are just like notorious for like random issues, right? And it's not for lack of people trying to make sure that, like, it's not like we're like, oh, just cheaping out on servers or something like that, right? Like we will do our best to get as much as we can, but you just never know what kind of a random performance issue can go wrong. And the sucky thing about it is like you can make some really subtle mistake somewhere, and it results in like a huge amount of chaos for the players, because like you go over some weird threshold and you get some deadlock or some random thing happens, and it just everything dies. And so that kind of stuff really sucks. I really hope we can do well. I mean, the nice thing is, at least, is that it's all based on PoE1 backend stuff. Like that's been tested to a pretty reasonable degree by this point.
Yeah.
I think we can do okay. But on the other hand, we may get more players than what our backend has ever dealt with before, and I think it's very, very likely at this point that will happen. As I said, you can never really know.
I don't know if you're like comfortable sharing a number you're prepared for, but like, are you prepared for like 1 million players, for example? If that's something you're.
Well, a million is how many is what we're prepared for as far as instance capacity goes.
Okay.
Okay. Wow.
We
okay.
also are prepared to increase that as well, like in terms of just like talking to cloud vendors and stuff like that about like, what if we go over this? Like, do we have a plan for how we're going to scale up? Like that kind of stuff. So 1 million is the capacity that we'll have on day one.
Będą to
before we know
powiększać.
how many people we're going to get. And my hope is that that'll be enough.
Cool.
I'm pretty sure we'll get it in 1 million. I don't think it's going to go. I think the chance of going above 1 million is pretty low, honestly. But you never know. You never know.
Yeah. You never know.
Yeah, I think, as I said, I think the chance of going above that is pretty low. Just because bear in mind it is paid, right? It's not like okay. Let me say this on our full release when it's free. Like I think the numbers will be much higher than 1 million. I think that's going to be very, very high, like absurdly high. But for a paid early access,
Nie
I
no,
think
bańka
getting to 1 million would
będzie.
be a
Jak
very
myślicie,
good success.
bańka będzie czy nie?
Like that would be crazy. But yet I think that we might be on the way to it for sure.
Yeah.
As I said, 1 million is what we're because of the fact.
Ja myślę, że na spokojnie, bo jeszcze ludzie kupią to 6 grudnia, bardzo dużo.
Capacity. When I say instance, by the way, I'm talking about the
Jeszcze będzie więcej niż bańka.
players play on, as opposed to like the back end, which is like where all the
Lekko.
which is the scaling challenge that's much more hard to know.
Cool.
Now, as far as like testing, like testing the back end and making sure it can work, the hard part there is like, can you simulate player numbers, like correctly enough to actually know what's going on? So we've got a synthetic test that goes up to 1.6 million in the back end before it falls over, and we want to try and improve that to 2 million before we launch, just so that we like can be like okay. But the thing is that that's a synthetic test, right? Like
Ciężka misja by
we
była.
write a bot that simulates what a player does, but like what if we're just wrong about that? And like people, and there's all sorts of numbers that you can play around with, like how often do people change areas, and how often do people, like how many items do people pick up and not pick up, and like we don't really know the numbers for that. And we can look at PoE1 and we can kind of assume that they're similar, and we can try and kind of like get things to like some kind of real world situation, but then it'll just be some other random thing we don't even think about that like players end up doing that we just don't even that can cause the issue.
Ciężko przewidzieć, tak. Generalnie mówi, że jakby testowane przez boty mają te wszystkie mają te wszystkie serwery, no są przygotowani na 1 milion, chcą to powiększyć do 2 i będą to zwiększać z czasem też Early Access, ale nie mogą przewidzieć tego, jakie ruchy gracze wykonają i tak dalej, także to zawsze jest pod kwestią zapytania. No realistycznie na pewno coś będzie się działo. gdyby się udało to zrobić launch bezproblemowo, no to myślę, że to by przeszło do historii. Ale raczej nastawiam się na delikatne, przynajmniej delikatne problemy. Siema Maruda, cieszę się, że się podobał film. Nie, to Blizzard jest, ale jakby ludzie mają teraz świadomość, nie?
We've got more than one of these, but like to know which one to contact, you need to know, like, you need to have something to work out, like,
Bebe to ja ta.
what is the thing that, like, that will tell you, like, which instance manager I should be talking to whenever I'm going to go to a new area. And so that we shard this based on the area, the area index. And the thing that we realized recently was that, like, when everyone plays the game initially, they're all going to be in the same area. They're all going to be starting in what's called G11, which is like the first area of the game. And then a bunch of those people, like, there'll be a very similar amount of time that people will take to get from there to the next area.
Yeah.
And so that means that everyone will go from there to like the next area. And so that means like all the load's going to be on one of these instance managers, and then all the load's going to move to a different instance manager. It's all going to happen at the same time, which means there's actually like the thing with having more of these is like completely defeated by just the way that will happen on launch. And like that's not something that our load test would immediately notice because like we kind of have to think about how the actual players will actually be behaving on release day to be able to see that kind of issue. So like that's one we did think of, but like there could be 200 other things like that we didn't think of that like, you know, could result in problems. And so this is the kind of stuff that like, you know, as I said, that you just never expect in the back end. So this is probably like way too much detail and like I'm being way too
I love the
technical here,
transparency.
But
It's really
but
great.
okay, but anyway, that's
Siema Antosiek, Essa. Ty, ja jeszcze nie kupiłem Early Access, muszę to kupić.
whatever problem we driven into is like really obvious to us, so we can just fix it. But it's because the part that really sucks is like
Widzimy się 6
the thing
grudnia
fell over,
wszyscy.
like there's no crash, there's no like thing. It's
Zresztą nam będzie stream w piątek, 6 grudnia zaczynamy, oczywiście maraton PoE. Jedziemy na pełnej, prawdopodobnie robimy 40 parę godzin, 48 godzin, jak się rozkręcimy, coś takiego, że zaczynamy stream w piątek, kończymy w niedzielę.
To be fair, you could just do a surprise
O
launch
tak,
right now, then
Tycu.
there won't be like no one's expecting it. You just
well, there was somehow I don't think that's a good idea. So, well, I guess what
O dziwo nie, Xaron, o dziwo nie!
on like I have a yeah.
Dobrej nocki lunczy, tak jest. O 8 będziesz miał pigułeczkę, wyśpij się elegancko. Ja po streamie od razu siadam do materiału, krótki film konkretny, bez pierdolenia, 8:00.
a question about ExileCon. Are there going to be more ExileCons? Will there be one before or after release? Like, what's the vibe there?
So we were actually originally planning to have one next year, and as it got closer, we were just like, man, do we really want to? Are we really wanting to be having to deal with another ExileCon this close? Like it's like, you know, we're pretty tired right
It's a lot of work.
now. I don't know if I can actually. It's a lot of work, and it is like a huge amount of work. So we're kind of like, you know what, we're not going to do one in 2025. So we'll think about the year after that. But we were, as I said, we actually originally like had made a booking and everything of like the venue, and we're actually keen. But then when we really looked at it, we were like, I worry that we're going to be like close to like to like if we're like really close to the release at that point when that would have been scheduled, that could just be really like too much load on our studio all at one time, because running an ExileCon really is like, it is a crazy amount of work for the whole studio. Like it's just a huge amount of stuff. So I am almost certain we'll have another one. I just don't think we're gonna have we're just not gonna have one next year, just because it's gonna be too much going on, I think, for our studio. Because you know, it's really fun to run them, like even though it's all that work, like it is really fun to run them and like having all the community there. Like it's a really fun thing. And like if we had infinite resources, then having ExileCon right before the full release would be like the most amazing market.
Nazwa bardzo krótka, trzymaj się Taurus, nie tylko twoja. Ja dzisiaj 3,5 godziny, 6 dzień z rzędu. Niestety. Trzymaj się, regeneruj, do juterka, widzimy się jutro. Może na nowym kompie już. Na nowym kompie może. Znaczy myślę, że na pewno. Bo już dzisiaj doszedł i z Tycem działamy, jutro już się widzimy na sprzęcie pod PoE. A czemu tak dużo pracy na YouTube? Wiesz?
So it's not like you have to fight 300 breaches to do that, but
I wokół. Cała restrukturyzacja rzeczy.
should we allow more portals for some of these bosses, because like, you know, it's like the first time that you save up, the first time you're gonna fight it, and then you just die instantly to some ability, and like, is that okay?
Na pewno, no.
And
Tylko właśnie Tycu, ja od razu po streamie biorę się za materiał. Muszę zrobić materiały czy ten jeden przynajmniej, i potem już na nowym kompie druga runda. Więc ja się wezmę za to od razu i od razu do ciebie koluję, dobra?
It is one of those things though that like if it really was a problem, I guess we could readdress it. But like,
No, dobrze, dobra, zajebiście.
just one death
Dobra.
even for those for the time being.
Cool.
But yes,
Yeah, very
there was a
interesting.
lot of argument about it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like I'm
Taurus zaktualizuje po prostu informacje na Twitchu. Tam jest sprzęt, także wszystko będzie na Twitchu dostępne dla wszystkich.
How do you feel about
Dobra.
safe mechanics like Toda? Like obviously,
Strzałeczka, Taurus.
RuneScape is probably the game that comes to mind where you can very, very much more than any game I can think of tailor exactly what type of content you want to be doing, right? Like,
Right.
if you want to, you can do completely safe content, or you can focus on like a really hard boss fight where it takes all of your focus. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on like being able to tailor your custom content?
Tak,
So,
tak.
I mean, I would say that PoE is pretty strong in this regard as well, right? Like you've got the ability to change the degree to which, like, how many mods you put on maps, and then like how much you're juicing things with mechanics for the towers, and like all sorts of stuff like that. So I would say that PoE is one of the games where you do actually have quite a lot of control. So like you can definitely get like, look, if you're running a white map, there's not a huge amount that's just going to randomly kill you if you're powerful enough to deal with that. You should be okay. It really is the other the other extra difficulty you add that makes it so that you're so that you're more safe. And like especially now that the bosses have been moved out of the regular map so that you can choose whether you're doing them or not. Like you have even that choice as well. So yeah, I'm a fan of tailoring content difficulty, and that is the goal for us as well, right? Just like make sure that you can decide that.
Awesome. Yeah, no, me too. I'm a big fan of that.
Możecie wybierać, czy chcecie bossów, czy chcecie density. Kurwa, pięknie. I skupić się na endgame, jaki lubicie.
So let's say that I've opened an expensive boss fight. It took me a while to farm, and I'm halfway through the fight, and I'm like, "Oh, this is not going well. This is not going down well." But I don't want to leave either. Can I pause the fight and be like, "Steel Mage, I need help right now. Please come get me." And can he then like, while I'm paused, can he come help me?
So.
Dobre pytanie.
Okay, so currently you actually can't like do things like accept invites and everything while you're paused.
Okay.
Now we actually had planned to allow you to do way more stuff while paused.
Yeah.
There was this whole pause rework we were going to do. We were going to change the interface so you can pause the game and still be able to like look at the rest of the interface and like kind of do certain things while paused or not. And then we could just make the decision of like what's allowed when paused and what isn't.
Yeah.
But we never got it. We unfortunately didn't get time to do it.
Oglądaj, Radek, oglądaj.
You wouldn't be able to accept a challenge while pause. But that being said, you could like pause the game, message your friend, he sends you an invite, you unpause quickly, click accept, and then pause again, right? Like it is kind of possible.
Right.
And so there's kind of really no reason to like not allow you to accept an invite while paused for that reason, because like you can just kind of do that. Like that would be possible.
Cool.
And ultimately that would mean that you can kind of do that. The question then is like, can you get to the person in a fight? And that depends on the context. Now, I don't actually know 100% of all the rules.
Ty co, kurwa.
I believe
Uwielbiam Tycu, jak walni komentarz czasami, to jest koniec świata. Tycu. No, Jonathanek to ładnie kofeiny dopierdolił dzisiaj, aż powietrze musi zaciągać dla schłodzenia systemu. Ma liquid cooler
you can go
normalnie.
into the boss fight. So during campaign, you can
2000.
certainly just like get into someone's boss fight very easily.
Yeah.
What I don't know is what the situation is with regard to maps and exactly how that works. So I would have to check on that to work out exactly what you could do there. I am sure there's going to be all sorts of like exploits and like random issues around pausing and checkpoints as well, and like all of those things. Like I just have a feeling that there's going to be stuff. Like we obviously do our best to think of these, but I'm sure there's going to be some stuff. So there might have to be some tweaks to the rules later on here. But as far as I know, you can do that. I believe. So I'm pretty sure what should happen is I think that for maps, the last checkpoint is like still in the map room.
Yeah.
Because there's no checkpoints in map. So I'm pretty sure what would happen is they'd go outside the map, they would be standing where the portals are, and if there's a portal available, they'll be able to go through that portal. And so if you moved the portal close to the boss fight before you went into it, because you can't use the portal while in the boss fight, then that would mean they'd be outside the boss fight. And so long as there's a way to get into the boss fight after the fact, it should work. So as far as I know, that should be how it works at the moment. But as I said, there might be individual rules that we can add or remove or whatever. Like there'll probably be tweaks to this, I'm sure.
Cool. Also, chat really wants me to correct you and say it's we call it swirly.
What? Okay.
Yeah,
For some
the blue
reason, people around here call them seashelling.
Right.
I don't know where that's. Maybe that's just in GGG slang for this.
That's funny.
Seashelling.
Yeah, I
'cause
mean,
it apparently looks like a seashell.
that is really cool though. I'm obviously a little bit biased. Like I would love
Muszlowanie.
service where I'm like coming to rescue people. So that'd be
Right.
that'd be very fun.
Well, as far as I know, that should be possible right now. But as I said, we might tweak the rules.
Cool. A little bit of like a more random cutesy question with how do you feel about like mini games like fishing or just like things to do that aren't necessarily
Tak,
like the core
fishing,
game?
fishing.
I don't know, like.
No kurwa. No co?
Some people find that stuff fun. I guess I see the mini games in PoE as more like the different league mechanics. So like those are the things that we're probably more likely to add.
Dobre pytanie zadał, no.
I know people have been wanting a fishing mini game for a long time. I guess look, we have boat support now, right? Like
I know.
from the hideout. so you never know, I guess.
Śmieję się z tego jeszcze. Fishing jest ważny w grach.
Factor authentication, is that something we can see improvements of in PoE2?
So this is
Pytanie było, czy phishing będzie. No ja.
really easy to
Nie
add
będzie.
two-factor authentication. The hard part is all the support policy around what happens when people lose their second factor, and it's like, okay, so like, how do you verify someone who's lost their second factor? And then like that's a whole thing that's all drama around this, and then like you open yourself up to like all sorts of like support mistakes you could be making when with that kind of stuff, and like it's notoriously like you have this thing, and then people say, oh, you should just tell people that if they had two-factor, then if they lose the second factor, they're just hosed. And it's like, well, you can say that now.
Yeah.
You say that right up to the point you do lose your second factor, and then you're like, why is there no recovery process for this? You know what I mean? Like there has to be a recovery process, and then it's like, okay, so then how do we verify it? So then people are like, oh, you could like take government ID, and it's like, okay, well now there's like GDPR and privacy implications of this, and it's just kind of an endless rabbit hole of like random policy and horrible stuff, and so like we should have it, right? Like absolutely we should, 100% we should have two-factor. We just don't, and it's all because of that, like the tricky stuff around this, and like
Nocna ryba, proszę zostawić moją rodzinę. Sorki.
we just need to dig ourselves out of the hole of all the policy
Adamski
issues
siema.
around support for this.
Słaby
That's the thing.
wpół,
And so what I
siemanko.
will say though is just as a thing is that you can effectively outsource the two-factor on your account by using Steam if you want, because they have two-factor, and if Steam is the only login method on your account, then effectively you're just relying on their two-factor to be able to work. So you still have that option at least. But yeah, we should add two-factor to the regular login system, and I want to add two-factor to the regular login system. It's just a question of getting time to sort through all
Cześć
the problems
Wika.
with it.
Speaking of the regular logging system, I can't remember if this was already confirmed, but do we still have both the standalone client and Steam?
Yep.
Nie zrozumiałem pytania. Co on się spytał? Standalone client? Standalone client chyba, tak.
There is a limit of support gems, right? I can only use element control destruction on one gem. I can't use it on two gems.
Correct.
Is that rule still the same on my weapon swap? Let's say that I have a lightning ability in one weapon swap and a cold ability in the other, but on both of these main gems, I want to use control destruction.
Cześć Wiko.
So there's one per character. It doesn't relate to weapon swap. Because the thing that I just want to clarify around this is that like it's not like you've got slots that are just like one versus the other, right? Like when you look at your skill screen, they're all just on one screen. That you just get to enable or disable certain skills for being used by a certain weapon swap. So there's no as far as the question goes, like it is one for your entire character.
Okay.
Okej, krótko.
When we saw
Jeden na charakter.
like videos, somebody had a video going through the settings and stuff like that, and I did not see lockstep or predictive being there. Is that still a thing?
Nie wiem, ja idę po kawę zaraz.
Why
wracam.
wouldn't it have been there?
Ale słucham.
It could have been there. Okay, so
Apparently, it's
Should
only on
have
the
been- I'm
menu
not sure-
screen.
oh yes, because you can't change it while you're in your while you're in game. But yeah, it should be there. As far as I know. One thing I will say is that predictive with WSD. Sorry, not predict. Okay, let me get this right. Okay, so there is a mode called hybrid. And I think that with WSD, predictive turns into hybrid, but I'm not sure whether or not they've actually like fiddled around with the interface of this. Hybrid is the mode that consoles use. But I don't think it tells you about it because I don't think there's a setting for it on consoles.
Right.
But effectively, what that is, it's like it's somewhere in between predictive and lockstep. I guess I could like, and effectively what it is that. This is kind of irrelevant, but effectively, with lockstep, when there's lag, internet lag, the whole game freezes. And with predictive, when there's internet lag, the game does not freeze. Hybrid is a mode where we still use predictive networking, but we still freeze everything when the server hasn't replied to you, and that's just because it keeps everything sync a little bit better, but prevents some of the issues that you get in predictive. That mode just works a bit better when you're using direct control, WSD versus and stuff without causing too many desync issues. So that's just a random detail there. But yeah, as far as I know, they still work, and they should be fine. What I worry about. And this is just random speculation on my part, is that like pretty much everyone in GGG plays in lockstep.
Yeah.
And so what that means is that like I worry that there won't be as much testing in predictive, and there could be like issues that happen in predictive that we're just not aware of because of the fact that like everyone's just playing in lockstep all the time. So it probably hasn't received the same testing as what lockstep gets. So I would suggest to you play in lockstep if you can. Obviously, the issue is when your high latency is high. That's the sort of stuff that will be that I'm sure will get more testing as we go into early access as well. But just random thing.
A question I just thought of was in PoE1, a thing that can happen is assets loading and being invisible if there were already loading ones. Is that a fixed thing in PoE2?
Unfortunately, that's not fixed, and this is something that really, really bothers me. But look, it's something that we're going to be like I really want to fix that. I really, really want to fix it. Like it's the worst thing to me is that occurring. So we'll get to the point where that can occur. It's actually been made harder in PoE2 because of the fact the assets are larger in general. You know, like higher resolution textures and higher resolution like models and stuff like that. So. I don't think it will necessarily be worse or anything, but yeah, it really sucks to me whenever a thing doesn't load. And so this is a thing that we will be working on and improving over time. I want to get to the point where it's just 100% the case that you never see an asset pop. Like that would be ideal.
Awesome.
But we'll work towards that. But it isn't. We aren't there yet.
A lot of people are asking about pre-download, especially for people
dobre
with slow
pytanie.
connections, being able to start downloading the files before the 6th.
Kiedy?
So the concern there
Dobra,
would
nie wiem.
be what do you call it? Data mining. Yeah, that's the concern with that.
My question is pre-download / data mining.
Yeah. I'll like we're definitely more vulnerable to data mining for PoE2 than we are in PoE1 usually, just because like there's so much more new stuff, like just the whole campaign being something people haven't played. So like it's that would be the
uniknąć data mine'u, więc pewnie
I do
późno.
understand why you'd want this though. I guess I'll just have to talk to. I guess I just have to talk and see how we feel about it. Like, the concern is data mining though. That would be.
Okej, czyli nie wiadomo jeszcze kiedy będzie. Przepraszam, można zrobić pre-downloada, ale wiadomo, że boją się data mine'u. I z tym, mając to w głowie, no to raczej spodziewam się bardzo późno, nie? To nawet może być dzień wcześniej albo tego samego dnia. Z 10 godzin wcześniej, nie?
That's like a lot of people.
Nie, no musi być dzień wcześniej, bo to nie wytrzyma.
To improve certain things will be harder to data mine than they were in the past. But on the other hand, there are some things the client just has to have. And if the client has to have it, then there's just no way to prevent data mining of it because it has to be on the client for the client to be able to be able to see a mod on the client has to have the text of the mod, right? Yeah. So on some level you've got to have that stuff. So yeah.
Cool. Makes sense. Is rarity multiplicative or additive with map / monster rarity?
So player rarity is player rarity is multiplicative with the map rarity, yeah. Okay. So that's still the case.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
A question about what leagues are, because obviously we are still going to have leagues in PoE2. What are they going to be based around? Right now, they're being inspired by other games. Is that still going to be the case?
Oh, I mean, that's always the case, right? We're always
Yeah.
looking at other mechanics. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to what is cool. And so that means that all we're really doing when we're looking at other games is like, is there something we can notice here that could inspire us to be cool? But like, it doesn't have to be another game. It could be a movie or like just some random other thing. Like, you never know where the inspiration is going to come from. But that stuff can definitely happen. Just, can we come up with a cool mechanic? That's all it comes down to.
Yeah. Is there any game off the top of your head that you're like, oh, do we really like want to find a way to like get this in PoE that like inspires you?
I don't know that I can name one right now. If like it's like anything that would have happened like that, we probably already made a league for it.
Yeah.
So it would have to be something recent, and we haven't been talking about leagues in PoE2 yet, so we haven't had like a brainstorming session about that yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, as I said, I don't think I can come up with one at the moment.
Awesome. And it's pretty much the final question here. I kind of tried to avoid open-ended questions, but is there any particular large engine changes with PoE2 that allows you to do something that you've always wanted to do in PoE1 but you weren't able to?
O,
So most of the changes,
Ciekawe
like
pytanie.
engine-wise, are actually on PoE1's engine because we wanted to merge them so that we can make all the assets transfer.
Yeah.
Probably one of the largest changes that is different between PoE1 and 2 is the global elimination system. And what that kind of means is that so like any and this was like we had GI in PoE1 as well, but it kind of works differently. So like effectively, the nice thing that you can do with a really good GI is that you can light objects without having to actually place lights in them. Like they just get lit by the glowing parts, and so you just get a really nice like soft form of lighting from certain things. And certain areas can actually be lit entirely with the GI system, which is just really nice. Like you get the ability to do some lighting that's just really quite different than what PoE1 has been capable of. So yeah, like that's pretty cool. Trying to think if there's anything else that like we didn't actually port over, but not really, like because we've tried to get everything as much as possible to be.
Cześć Andrzej, Witch Infernalist, ta 200%, potem Soso i Hunter.
Oh, there's quite a lot of stuff to do with like
Ranger. A ty?
one of the engine features we have is the ability to read this is like real technical stuff, but to read the material that's on the ground and use that in
Ja
the
tym
shader.
będę grał, bez kitu. Kurwa, ale to jest piękne zdjęcie. Piękny fanart, no, Witch Infernalist.
Yeah.
When the bear does a slam, like the actual ground that's under the bear, like the chunks of rubble that come up are like red from the ground that's actually there.
Mercenary to chyba, no, bardzo popularna klasa. Bardzo popularna klasa, Andrzej, no. Dużo osób jest zerany na Mercenary. Mega ładnie, mega ładnie.
Kind of come up, so that's like another one.
That's very cool.
What's another one that's like PoE2 only? I'm not sure.
To potem gruby guru zrobisz scenę normalnie. Javazonkę, też się na nią kroję. Też będę chciał Javkę zrobić, ale to potem.
One originally a like CPU based particle system, and then for most of PoE2's development, we've had this like GPU based particle system, and that just means that the particles can look way nicer. And like that is available in PoE1, but it's just like all those assets were made like a long time ago, right? So they all use the old system. So like just what we're doing with particle systems now is just like way cooler, in my opinion. Like just like a lot of the graphics, like there's stuff like the particles will respond to like wind in the environment. So like if you have like explosions, you can have like wind events on the explosions that will cause like other particles that are around to just get pushed away and stuff like that. Like there's just like little cool things like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
so
so
I don't
cool.
know. There's just like there's nice little touches, but as I said, all that stuff is theoretically available in PoE1. It's just it would require us like redoing a bunch of effects to actually take advantage of it. Yeah, probably some of the newer stuff in the leagues probably does, but
Yeah.
most stuff isn't that. Yeah. I don't know. Hopefully that answers some of those questions.
No, that was great. Actually, I thought of another thing. Guild tabs. Guilds are not transferring over to PoE2. What about guild
Correct.
stash tabs?
So because of the fact the guild isn't, it means the stash tabs aren't either. And that's kind of unfortunate because I would want that to happen. But in order to, the guilds just aren't integrated across both games. So therefore, because one guild owns the tab, that guild isn't across, like therefore the tabs are where they are. And as I said, that's really not a like policy decision. It's just a kind of technical decision. So I suppose in order to fix that, we'd have to merge the guilds of PoE1 and 2, and like I wouldn't even be against that idea. It's just requires more work than what we have time to do, unfortunately.
So the answer is
to be able to make something
basically
happen.
we will have to buy the stash tabs again, right?
You will for that, yes, unfortunately. But as I said, I just wish that wasn't the case, but it just is, unfortunately, just due to the...
Będziecie musieli kupować guild sztaby jeszcze raz w PoE2.
Is PoE Mobile still being worked on?
It's not being worked on right now. Like we
PoE
put it on
Mobile.
hold when
U siebie 2 razy
like, as we
KSG. No i to jest dobry plan, Mustaw. That's the spirit, nice. Co Archmage, też będę tym grał potem.
then we're taking over the console interface for PoE2. So what that meant was that we suddenly had a team that could actually work on all that stuff and do all the work that we need to do for console. So the intention would be that when we get to the point of feeling comfortable with PoE2 is fine, all the interface stuff is all resolved, we're out of early access, we're kind of everything's good, then would be keen to restart the console version, the mobile version again. But for the time being, we're not working on it, and we'll just have to get to the point where feel okay, the console version of PoE2 is good enough that we can get some of the resources and move them over again.
Awesome. I don't know if the last one's a question. I just
Kesaks o 20. O 20 startujemy.
Let's mute other player sounds. I hate the goblin troops. I want to throw my hat in that.
Okay.
So much.
Understood. Yeah, understood. I'll talk to them about it.
Awesome. That was pretty much all the questions I had. Thank you so much. We are a few days out for launch and you're taking time to do this. We all the community super appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much. And we're very excited to play PoE2 when it comes out.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you very much for giving me a chance to talk to you guys again. It's always fun.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, for everybody watching on both YouTube and Twitch,
all right.
Try to die. Less than
See you later,
the
guys.
servers do. Awesome. All right, bye. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Bye. No problem. All right, I've got someone to shut off the stream myself, I guess. All right.
Nah, it's
Here
all
we go.
good. Thank you. Bye.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Awesome.
Zarąbiście. Świetny wywiad.